Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. The ulu is a traditional and beloved Inuit knife with thousands of years of history. But a new version, produced far from the Arctic, is getting criticized by Inuit groups who say a non-Inuit company is capitalizing on a traditional design. Natalie Pressman reports.
This marketing video advertises a kitchen knife that's good for cutting food into kid-sized bites.
Would have taken me double the amount of time that it would have if I wasn't using the Tot Chop.
I mean, we're the first people in the world to have this shape of a knife.
But those claims by US-based company Tot Chop are false.
They're not an Inuit-owned organization, and they're reproducing our tools to make a profit off of it, right? That's why we're mad.
Oh, there's a picture of it here.
Inuk Ulu artist Ken Mackay and his father-in-law Joe Karatek know them well.
My grandmother made them in the past and kind of inspired me to make them myself as well. Connected me more with my culture.
The ulu was traditionally a woman's knife, still used as a kind of multi-tool.
Again, people's hands are different.
Karatek taught his son-in-law how to craft an ulu. He says it's unfair for Inuit to compete with Southern companies.
Today, it's really hard to protect the interest and integrity of who first designed this.
Tot Chop's website acknowledges the ulu's Arctic indigenous roots, which contradicts its video marketing. CBC News reached out to ask about these mixed messages. It did not respond. But it's not the first time a non-Inuit company has sold an Inuit design.
They should give proper credit to Inuit artisans.
The president of an organization representing Inuit women says Southern companies using Inuit designs should do more to support the cultures they're taking from.
They should consult with organizations before even developing anything.
Consumers should be asking themselves, like, is this authentic? And if it's not authentic, what are the ethics of me purchasing this?
Mackay hopes they do, and he's not the only one. The petition calling on Tot Chop to stop selling its knives now has over 200 signatures. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Every minute matters when it comes to dealing with the mess left behind by a rock slide at the Eagle Gold Mine in the Yukon. That's according to experts with direct knowledge of the mine. 3 weeks ago, part of the mine failed and a massive rock slide tore off a piece of the heap leach pad. The heap leach is where gold gets extracted from ore using cyanide mixed with water. The slide sent 4 million tons of material crashing down, and about half of that escaped containment areas. Yukon Mines Minister John Stryker has said there is potential for significant environmental impacts. But experts who are part of the First Nation of Nacho-Nyak Dun's emergency response team are painting a far more grim picture of what's happening at the mine. Over the last 3 weeks, they've visited the site and have seen firsthand what's going on there. They say what they're seeing is worrisome and warn the worst is yet to come. Julian Green has been digging into this story. He joins me now with more. What do these experts mean by the worst is yet to come, Julian?
They say cyanide detected so far will pale in comparison to what soon could be coming down the valley. And it's probably too late to do much about it, at least to the degree needed to really protect the environment. These experts, they say a plume or rolling wave, they have different ways of characterizing it, of contaminated groundwater is heading toward Haggart Creek. And that creek, it's nearly 1 kilometer away from the toe of the slide. That's where there's a debris field now, where millions of tons of cyanide-laced material came crashing down weeks ago. The waterway is habitat for fish like Arctic grayling and salmon. I don't need to tell you the shape that salmon are in these days. Their numbers have been plummeting for years. And Haggart Creek then flows into the McQuestion River. From there, the Stewart, and then the Yukon River. Now, Farzad Moham is a chemical engineer and water treatment expert. He says since the slide, pumping capacity at the heap leach facility has been disabled for weeks. He also says storage space for surface water has been extremely limited. He says storage capacity, in fact, has run out, and he told me that around noon on Monday.
Okay, so things could have even changed from then. Let's talk more about the cyanide, Julian. We know it has been detected in Haggart Creek. How do you treat that?
There's an industry term for it, and it's called cyanide destruction. The company has a system in place to do that, but Moham says the key piece of it, and that's hydrogen peroxide, is in very short supply. And that's not the only problem here, Megan. Peroxide can break down cyanide, but it also reacts with it and creates ammonia, which, as you know, is also toxic to plants and animals. So in the end, we're kind of dealing with something of a catch-22, sort of swapping one chemical compound for another.
How much ammonia are you going to end up with? Well, exactly the same amount of cyanide that you had in your water. So you are looking at a very high concentration of ammonia, even if you destroy all of your cyanide. You manage to destroy it, despite all of the odds. If you manage to destroy all of your cyanide, you still have ammonia. There is no plan for ammonia.
Now, the Yukon government ordered Victoria Gold to create a system that could intercept and store the contaminated groundwater. Where are we with that?
Right, you're right about that. The government did make those orders. It asked for a plan to, among other things, intercept and collect groundwater. The Yukon government also wants the plans for expanded monitoring and water treatment efforts. Those plans, I should point out, they're not public, and it's unclear if the government will make them public, but they do exist. A government spokesperson told me as much. Experts say, though, the time it's running out. So I did speak with someone named Bill Slater, and he has more than 30 years of experience working in water management in the territory. He believes the slide eliminated the company's contingency plans and equipment for dealing with something of this magnitude.
Those facilities and equipment are critical. They also lost access to the backup storage pond because the spillway was destroyed. So the pumping capacity was destroyed. The spillway was blocked.
Now, the company did build a couple of dams, and it's also been taking water samples from many different sites. But Slater says it's just not enough. He also says 5% of the cyanide solution was lost in the initial slide, that the remainder has for weeks been draining into the valley. He says experts haven't been seeing any of that solution at the collection sites, which he says can mean only one thing. It's in the groundwater now. And slowly but surely it's heading toward that creek I mentioned, Haggard Creek. Slater and Moham both say it could reach the creek in 2 to 3 weeks. Though at this point there's no way to know for sure, and there's another piece to this too.
The design of heap leach facilities is such that they typically do not have adequate storage capacity on site to store all of the leach solution that is in the system. In order to keep that solution in place and avoid its discharge to the valleys around, the pumps must keep running. And that's what happened here. We lost the pumps. And so there never was storage capacity for all of that leach solution. The system wasn't designed to have that storage capacity, and that's typical for heap leach facilities.
Slater says companies see increased storage as just too costly and instead sort of decide to manage the risks in other ways. And this seems important because right now there are proposed projects in the Yukon that include using heap leach facilities. And one, for example, is the proposed casino mine.
So where is Victoria Gold in all of this, Julian?
It's a really good question. For 3 weeks and counting, just to be clear here, no one with Victoria Gold has spoken publicly about the mine failure. We've been calling every day. We do have a few news releases from the company, but those are pretty cursory. There's not a lot of detail included in them. So Cord Hamilton is a civil engineer who's also been hired by the affected First Nation as part of its emergency response team. He says behind the scenes, communication from Victoria Gold has looked like passing of papers, letters in the form of daily reports sent to the Yukon government. He says an emergency should get people into the same room, exchanging views, having dialogue, working together. But he says that's just not happening and hasn't been for too long.
This is like a worst case scenario. And if you are knowledgeable about this type of thing and the project, you know that now you have a semi-trailer loaded with dangerous goods going down a steep hill with no brakes and no steering. there will be inevitable impacts from this disaster, environmental impacts. How significant they will be really depends on how hard we hit this now. And we're already going far too slow. Frustration is that there are things that could be happening today. This is a time for transparency and exchange of information at a high level and collaborating. And that's not happening. This is not the time for laying blame. This is the time for how do we respond.
Okay, so we've heard from the Yukon government through weekly press briefings. And as I mentioned earlier, the Yukon government has also sent out numerous orders to Victoria Gold, including a new one to build 2 additional line water storage facilities. And that is, it appears, in response to the fact that that storage has run out.
Okay, so much to keep an eye on, Julian. I know you'll be covering it as we go forward. Thank you for your work on this.
Thanks, Megan.
We want to offer a clarification on a story we brought you yesterday about water advisories in the north. One is in Sabake, or Trout Lake. Now, it was brought to my attention that the way I pronounced the community's Dene name was a bit too close to the Dene name for Yellowknife, and that caused some confusion, so I do apologize for that. The water advisory, to be clear, is not for Yellowknife. It is for Trout Lake, or Sabake. And a reminder, that is a boil water advisory for Trout Lake. There's also one in Rankin Inlet right now. 3 of the Northwest Territories' 4 ferries have had problems over the last few weeks. The MV Lafferty near Fort Simpson is just the latest. The ferries near Sigachik and on the way to Wrigley have had closures as well. So why are the ferries having these issues, and all at the same time? The CBC's Inu Knives has been asking that very question, and tonight she brings us the answer.
Moaz Hassan has a truck full of groceries on the wrong side of the Liard River. It was headed for Fort Simpson, but it got stuck. The unexpected closure of the MV Lafferty to blame.
I'm preparing myself to go across the river and take some more fuel from the town here and go see what's happening. But I don't really know how many trips I have to do until we have the ferry back. I cannot send my truck back because I don't have another place to send it to.
The MV Lafferty is expected to be running again on Sunday. NWT's infrastructure minister says an engine problem was discovered late last week.
He had put out a note that the Lafferty was going to have some reduced hours to do scheduled maintenance on the engines. When we pulled it out of the water to look at the engines, it was apparent that there was an issue that, you can keep running the engine, is what I'm told, but it will damage it further, which reduces the life of the engine further.
The MV Lafferty is the 3rd ferry in the NWT to be shut down this summer. The MV Johnny Barons on the way to Wrigley was closed for 2 weeks. The MV Louis Cardinal near Sigachik was closed for 5 days earlier this month. Wozniak says the Barons and the Cardinal weren't broken, but part of the problem was bad timing.
Between the time when we do our pre-season work and Transport Canada coming up, in the one instance, they were going to move a fire suppression system in order to improve the weighting on the ferry, but that didn't get complete. And so the system was dismantled for movement, but not fully reassembled when Transport Canada came in and then required us to obviously finish that work and get it done. Similar issue up in the Louis Cardinal, that something was partway through a maintenance process, and now there we go. Transport Canada comes in and says, "Gosh, here we are, another fire suppression system not fully assembled."
Wozniak is taking it as a sign the NWT needs to re-examine some of its processes. That means aligning territorial and federal inspections. That way, when Transport Canada comes on site, the vessels are ready. She says she doesn't want to have a sailing season like this one ever again. Lainey Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Traveling along the Dempster Highway is on the bucket list for many who visit the Yukon. Starting near Dawson City and ending in Inuvik, the Dempster Highway is 740 kilometers of unpaved road. Some say stretches of the Dempster are in rough shape this summer. Last month, 2 separate accidents involving motorbikes occurred within days of each other. And that has some people calling on the Yukon government to do more to maintain the road and make it safer for travelers. Chris McIntyre has that story.
loose gravel, washboard ruts, and lots of dust. Some drivers say conditions along the Dempster Highway are downright dangerous.
The first half was pretty brutal. It was very washboardy. The worst part was like the shale, just with standard tires. It kind of threatens to like slash your tires every time you drive over it.
Faith LaBelle recently moved to Inuvik from Alberta. She says the drive to her new home got off to a bumpy start. Literally. As an emergency responder, she says the road's condition not only has her worried for her own safety, but the safety of other travelers.
On that road as well, and with how unstable it is and the washboards, if you were to lose a tire on one of those curves and you lose control of your vehicle and you go over that edge of the road where there should be barriers, like, you're dead. For me, that's kind of scary. Like, if people do crash on the Dempster, and as a paramedic here, we wouldn't even know until someone drives to them and then drives far enough to get cell service to call 911.
Making matters worse, the ambulance stationed at Eagle Plains no longer has anyone to run it. From here, it's 400 kilometers to the nearest hospital in Dawson City. Some say if anyone runs into trouble on this stretch of road, it could be a long time before help arrives.
Particularly in the motorbike traffic, we're seeing a lot more incidents on the road. Last week, we had another motorbike go down, unfortunately.
Now, where I'm standing along the Dempster Highway is one of many areas that drivers say conditions like this are creating a potentially dangerous situation. Now, this road is maintained by the Territory's Department of Highways and Public Works. The department says crews are out daily to keep the road at a safe standard, but unfortunately, accidents are out of their control.
It's rugged. Be prepared. Drive to the conditions to the road. It's really the personal safety piece that's really important to us. We just don't want people to get hurt. We want everybody to come home at the end of the day.
In the meantime, travelers are being told to take their time, follow the rules of the road, and enjoy the scenery. Chris McIntyre, CBC News, Dawson City.
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
I'm such a fan of this show.
Listen to the podcast, Q with Tom Power.
The story itself is so unbelievable. The industry wasn't set up for me to thrive in.
The presence I feel now is not something that I believed to be possible in the past.
So many people thought I couldn't do it. They doubted me.
I felt like I ripped my whole heart out.
I didn't realize how formative 25 to 30 would be.
I have to kind of repress my own self-doubt.
You're one of my favorite interviewers, so I was pumped.
Get out of here.
Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is unbelievable.
The heart and soul of any city is best served on a plate.
Très bon, merci. I have some women to tell you about. You don't know them, but you will.
Thank you for choosing Plan B.
Tell me what I need to do to save my family.
Please enter your date of travel.
I can't do this anymore.
If you could go back, change things, would you do it?
Canada's premiers have wrapped up their annual summer conference in Halifax. A key focus of this year's session was the separation of federal and provincial responsibilities. But on the final day, the leaders turned their attention to preparing for the next administration in the United States. Olivia Stefanovich has the latest.
The day after provincial and territorial leaders told Ottawa to stick to its lane, the premiers wade into an area of core federal responsibility.
I'm encouraging all the candidates vying to be the next Prime Minister to come forward with a credible plan over the next 4 years to hit the NATO 2% target.
The federal government recently announced a plan, but it's only expected to start spending 2% of GDP on defense in 2032.
Well, I'm encouraging the federal government to move more quickly. I think the timeline we have to think about is the next administration, whoever that may be, in the United States of America.
Our anxiety, and I think the anxiety of many British Columbians, is looking at the possibility of a Trump administration coming in the United States.
The premiers united in their concern, bracing for retaliation.
It's unambiguous the message from a potentially incoming Republican administration around what their expectations are from Canada around investments in defense. So to head that off, we really encourage the federal government to be prepared for that.
It's too late. If things escalate, to say we should have invested. The time is now to invest, given the tensions that exist around the world, given the uncertainty that exists around the world.
So we asked the federal
Their demand clear. The implication, Ottawa could do a better job at meeting its responsibilities if it sticks to its own jurisdiction.
It certainly seems that we are kind of replacing the federal government in many ways on some of the issues that are really important to our country.
From daycare to school lunches, they say the federal government is creating duplicate social programs.
They're wasting taxpayers' money, go through the provinces, and you know what happens? The premiers get pissed.
BC Premier David Eby announced full support today for Newfoundland and Labrador's court case, challenging Ottawa's equalization formula, payments that go to provinces to ensure uniform services across the country, a dispute that could continue when premiers meet next summer in Ontario. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Halifax.
Olivia mentioned there the Premier's push for the federal government to ramp up defense spending. It was a big topic at the closing news conference of the meeting. The premiers from Nunavut and the NWT used the time to remind Canadians about the important role the North plays in keeping the country safe and what they think the government can do better when it comes to Arctic security and investing in the North.
But there's an incredible opportunity that we're faced with in terms of the infrastructure gap we see between the North and the South and the vulnerabilities we see. As Northern Premiers, we've really pushed it when we met in Mitimatalik up in Pond Inlet recently, and then when we met in Whitehorse as well as Western Premiers. But the opportunity to see investments, specifically that are dual use. And I'll use Grays Bay Road and Port Project in the Western Arctic, which is at the mouth of the Northwest Passage, to use that as an incredible opportunity to not only serve the purpose of the Canadian Armed Forces or the Navy, but that of unlocking incredible critical mineral potential that is up in the North. So there's, I think, a generational opportunity before us to see these infrastructure come. We've had good discussions with Minister Blair, but I think at this point we need to see investment. There's good discussions, but it's the investments that will speak. So we look forward to continuing to build that relationship with Ottawa to see those investments actually flow to the communities we serve.
We also need investment. We're facing a situation right now, climate change has resulted in the lowest water we've ever seen on the Mackenzie River. For those of you who don't know, that's essentially our highway. A number of communities received their annual resupply through that river, up that river, and this year the water is too low to get barges up there. So we are now in a situation where we have communities that are essentially stranded. We need to fly in goods, which is going to, in many cases, double the costs that consumers are going to be paying in the grocery store. It's holding up construction of new infrastructure. It's a serious issue that we are facing. So what we need is special consideration, and we need investments in these nation-building projects like the Mackenzie Valley Highway. And I think that we can look at the 2% NATO target as well. And projects like this add to national security. They add to national defense.
The premiers of Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec also all called on the federal government to provide more money to the provinces so they can better support asylum seekers and refugees. Yukon Premier Ranj Pillay says the Yukon nominee program hit its max 3 months into the year. He wants to see the immigration system change.
We have to take a look at the entire system. I mean, we had a challenge in Canada. It's going to affect all of us. It was really around post-secondary institutions that were bringing in students. We saw, an immense amounts of students coming into Ontario, Quebec, and BC. But those students are now going all across the country, trying to find places to become Canadians. They filled significant holes in our workforce, but now they're going to be running out in the next 2 to 3 years, if not right now. So we're going to be losing workers. We don't have a strategy to keep them in our provinces and territories. So I think part of what we're trying to do is urge the federal government to say, look, it's not just, there's implications to these quick decisions you've made, and they're going to affect our economy. And we have to take into consideration how we're going to have an overall strategy that's going to put us in a place now, but also future-proof where we go with our workforce and how we deal with asylum seekers and folks coming through our economic immigration programs as well.
That was Yukon Premier Ranj Pillay speaking in Halifax at the end of the Premier's annual summer conference. Well, it could be a bad year for berries in Nunavut. That's according to Environment Canada's senior climatologist and an Inuk elder. Both are predicting a bad berry crop this summer. David Phillips and Jitalukaki say the berries may not be as plentiful or as sweet because of the combined cold and rainy weather. Phillips says it's been an unusually cold summer so far in the eastern Baffin region after a warmer winter and spring.
You mentioned about the berries. That's a very good point because the growth has just been stymied. We've seen about 25% less of the heat units that are required to bring those berries on. And so elders are absolutely right.
Jitalukaki is an elder in Iqaluit who is known for his weather knowledge. He agrees that the wet, cool temperatures will affect the berries.
If it rains too much, they would not grow from being too cold. Because of that, I haven't even checked yet to see if the berries are growing. We would know by now if there will be berries.
Kaki says the berries are usually the last to grow compared to other plants. So he says there should still be time for them to grow before fall freeze up. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
I was a grade 9.
Mr. Critch, you need glasses. Glasses? No, I just think the chalk is just a little soft.
One of these days we're gonna have to grow up, but today is not that day.
I don't want us to get older either.
Son of a Critch. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Are you ready to be entertained?
Stand-up comedy, best comedians from across the globe.
Oh, great.
An incredible lineup.
Canada.
Are you ready?
Oh.
Are you kidding me?
CBC's got the best in stand-up comedy.
That's pretty unbelievable, man.
It's a scam. It's a scam.
No way.
Ooh.
It's a bit spicy. It'll change your life. Catch it all free on CBC Gem.
Well done.
Y'all give it up. Give it up. Give it up.
So, you want to watch CBC News Explore, a new kind of news channel. Here's how to find us. We're on the CBC News app, on CBC Gem, and on your smart TV. Stream anytime. It's always free. CBC News Explore.
Sipping on a bit of Henny. Can I get a little Remy? Feeling heavy. Chilling, but I'm feeling ready. Pulled up in a big old Chevy. Dance floor stops and Miguel them drops. Queen with the locks and the crown on top. Feet in a box, never sound on pops. If it ain't Danny, give me crown on rocks.